I followed His Highness into exile for 3,000 miles. When the rebels captured me, they forced me to dance barefoot on burning coals. But I never uttered a word about where he was. His Highness wept, tears falling onto my blistered, festering feet, voice trembling with emotion. Lu Yun, I swear I will never let you down. But after the rebellion was crushed, he agreed to the Empress's proposal. He bestowed me in marriage to Qi Gonggang, the eunuch who served at her side. Lu Yun, just endure it. He's a eunuch, he can't really do anything to you. I suffered torment and humiliation, dying in rags and disgrace. But I was reborn, returned to the moment the Empress granted the marriage. Ignoring the searing pain in my toes, I knelt down and bowed low. I have long admired Lord Superintendent Shen. I beg your grace to grant me this match. If I had to marry a eunuch anyway, then I would marry the one with the most power. This was the new emperor's first grand banquet after taking the throne. The music of flutes and strings filled the air, graceful and unceasing. I knelt on the floor, the wounds on my toes tearing open again, soaking my socks in blood. The noble women of the royal clans covered their noses in disgust. She's absolutely nauseating. If I were her, I would have bitten my tongue and killed myself after what those rebels did. Half a month ago, Prince Chung launched his rebellion. I was tasked by Consort Jin to protect the third prince and get him safely back to the capital. Captured by the rebels, they forced me to dance on searing hot coals. Yet even then, I never revealed a word about His Highness's whereabouts, not until Lady Bo arrived with reinforcements. Lu Yun, I'm taking you home, he said, choking on sobs, as he carried me out of the burning pit himself. Even now, beneath his fine robes, the hand holding his wine cup still bears festering blisters. But the words he now speaks are, to commend Palace Maid Shen Lu Yun's loyalty, I hereby reward her with 100 taels of gold and grant her in marriage to Qi Baoquan, chief steward of the inner court. Before the banquet, he had personally warned me. Lu Yun, don't make things harder for me. Right now, I still need the Bo clan's support. The Empress is wary of you and wants to marry you off, but Qi Baoquan is just a eunuch. He can't do anything to you. If I hadn't lived this life once before, I might have believed him. In my previous life, I did exactly what the Emperor asked. I accepted the marriage. Even now, I can still recall the agony that ripped through my body. Qi Baoquan never left marks on my face, but my arms and legs, where my palace robes could cover, were mottled with bruises. A woman with ruined legs from being ravaged by rebels. Only a eunuch like me wouldn't mind that. I was humiliated beyond belief, unable to live, unable to die, until I finally wasted away on a bed in the eunuch's quarters. Then, unbelievably, I woke up right on the day of that damned imperial wedding decree. Swallowing the pain in my feet, I bowed again. Ignoring the gazes filled with disdain or curiosity, I turned to the Empress and requested, I do not object to marrying Qi Gonggang, but I already have someone I hold in my heart. Empress Bo's gaze flicked between me and the Emperor with a look of amusement. Oh, and who might that be? Back in my past life, when I was being tortured by Qi Baoquan, the Empress had told me. She wanted to humiliate me. And what could be more degrading than marrying a eunuch? They weren't even considered real men. So no noble sons, no clean-handed scholars or gentlemen from respectable families in the capital. None were ever within reach. Only marrying a eunuch would satisfy her thirst for my humiliation. Having resigned myself to fate, I gave her a graceful bow. I have long admired Lord Superintendent Shen. I beg His Majesty and Her Grace to grant this match. I hadn't realized Superintendent Shen, the one known for his ruthlessness, had already entered the hall. The entire palace fell into dead silence, as if even a pin drop would echo. His full name was Shen Zhizhang. He was the current head of the Eastern Depot. 3 years ago, after I followed His Highness to his fief, he appeared in the palace. They said he was ruthless, constantly reeking of blood. The late Emperor's personal hound, now one of the most powerful forces in the inner court. He had played a major role in quelling the rebellion and held sway as a third power in the capital. I had no other path. I could only take this gamble. Lord Shin, do you remember me? I'd meant to ask if we'd met before, but considering the secret crush I just staged for myself, I had to turn it into this careful probing. The Empress laughed out loud, clearly amused, as if watching me sign my own death warrant. After all, everyone knew that Lord Shun was indifferent to women and cared nothing for human emotion. Yet Shin Jizhong looked at me and said, "Lady Lu Yun of Zhongsue Palace."
Gentle, kind.
Of course I remember. His tone was so unusually soft that even the new emperor looked surprised. I too was a bit dazed. Lady Lu Yun of Zhongsue Palace. It had been so long since anyone called me that. The original Shun Lu Yun had been well known among the palace maids of the eastern and western palaces for being proper and courteous. But the person I was now couldn't even kneel to offer thanks without using every ounce of strength, still appearing utterly pitiful. Shun Jizhong stepped in front of me. I thought he might carry me, but he simply offered his arm, letting me lean on it to rise and give thanks. "Your servant Shin Jizhong, your maid Shin Lu Yun. We thank His Majesty for this grace." And just like that, the marriage was set. Before this, people only cursed Shin Jizhong for being ruthless, forming factions, eliminating rivals, destroying entire families without mercy. After our engagement, they added another title to his name, lecherous and power-hungry. An imperial wedding was already a lavish display of favor. Shin Jizhong even added his own touch. 10 miles of red bridal procession, all to marry a crippled palace maid like me. Whispers buzzed across the capital. Most claimed Shin Jizhong was staging a show, forcing me into marriage for prestige. After all, no matter how powerful he was still a eunuch. That day, I wheeled myself to the Eastern Depot, wanting to find him. At the gate, I first encountered Qi Baoquan, the Empress's eunuch. He was shackled by the Eastern Depot guards, body covered in marks from torture. The moment he saw me, his eyes burned with hatred, as if he wanted to scream at me. But his tongue had already been cut out. All he could do was vomit blood. The corridor was narrow. I couldn't back away in time. A figure in dark robes stepped in front of me. Careful. Shin Jizhong's robes were stained brown with blood. He frowned, clearly displeased. I recalled the rumors I'd heard. He was a bit of a clean freak. Seems they were true. "Let me help you change, my lord." As soon as I said it, I froze. I had forgotten I could no longer walk properly. These days, I couldn't even dress myself without help from the younger maids. "My thanks, Lady Lu." Shun Jizhong simply took the clean robe from his manservant and draped it over his shoulders, then leaned slightly toward me. As I helped fasten the belt at his waist, I noticed a tassel hanging there. "Was this given to you by someone important?" It had cloud patterns stitched on it. The fringe was worn, a few threads dangling. Its color had faded with too many washes. Someone of Shin Jizhong's status could have anything. But to keep such a simple, poorly made tassel, it must mean a great deal to him. Shin Jizhong's eyes dimmed slightly as he replied after a moment. "It was a gift from the one who saved my life." Who could possibly save someone as powerful as the superintendent of the Eastern Depot? I didn't have time to think about it. Empress Bo summoned me to Zhongsue Palace. She had abandoned her lavish Changle Palace and insisted on moving to this slightly more remote palace instead. To outsiders, she said it was because she missed her late mother-in-law. "I heard Aunt Lu Yun used to serve in Zhongsue Palace. Could I trouble you to see if the furnishings have been restored to their former state?" She claimed she wanted me to direct the palace staff in arranging the furniture, but that was just an excuse. What she really wanted was for someone to accidentally knock me over while coming and going. She herself lay behind a screen, pretending to be asleep. The servants coming and going made no move to help me up. So I simply sat on the floor. If I had to climb back up, I would. Maybe they'd even knock me over again once I did. Sure enough, a particularly brazen eunuch walked right over me. Heh. I let out a cold laugh. "Looks like the lot of you want to be the next Qi Baoquan, don't you?" I was no stranger to using borrowed authority to throw weight around. Qi Baoquan had been taken away by Xin Zhizhong himself. The charge? Forcing himself on a palace maid and forming an illicit sexual relationship within the inner court. But that accusation, I had someone deliver it to the Eastern Depot. It was originally just a test to see how Xin Zhizhong would react to my situation. Before the wedding banquet, Qi Baoquan had strutted around the eunuch's quarters, smugly convinced that I'd be handed to him. He boasted about how he'd toy with me. His vile, filthy words were too disgusting to repeat. Truthfully, he wasn't wrong. That was how my last life ended. But this time, things were different. I now belonged to Xin Zhizhong, or at least on paper. I had gambled that he would save face and not let Qi Baoquan off easy. I didn't expect him to act so swiftly. In less than 3 days, he gathered enough evidence and personally dragged Qi Baoquan to Empress Bo to have him thrown in prison. Behind a screen, the Empress's teacup shattered against the floor. She was clearly furious. So, I stopped pretending. Since your grace is awake, I shall report back. The restoration of Zhongsue Palace has been excellent. His Majesty will surely be pleased. Only one issue. Back when the late Empress Dowager was alive, there were no palace servants here who didn't know their place. I turned and coldly scolded the eunuchs and maids nearby. Didn't you see her grace's teacup shattered? What are you waiting for? Clean it up. I reached for the nearby wheelchair, intending to stand. At that moment, a pair of hands suddenly settled on the back of the chair. Everyone in Zhongsue Palace immediately dropped to their knees in unison. His Majesty had arrived. I bowed low, forehead to the floor, attempting to kowtow again. But his palm landed on my forehead before I could. Auntie, you forget, he said, when you're in Zhongsue Palace, there's no need to bow to me. His voice was so sincere that, for a moment, it felt as if the little Prince Yuan he, just a few years old back then, was standing before me once more. Back when he practiced archery in Zhongsue Palace. All the other servants were afraid of him, but I drew a bow and shot the apple right off his head. Aunt Lu Yun is amazing. My ancestors were famed horse archers from the grasslands, and though my family was in decline when I entered the palace, I never forgot what I'd been taught as a child. You reckless girl. You dare injure the prince. How many heads do you think you have to lose? Consort Zhen had pretended to scold me. But little Yuan he ran over and stood in front of me. A real man owns up to his failures. If I wasn't good enough to dodge it, how could I blame Auntie? As he got older, he refused to call me Aunt anymore. Every time it was, Sister Lu Yun, Sister Lu Yun. During our exile, he pretended to be my husband, shielding me from predatory strangers. Even when he was beaten, he held me tightly in his arms. When he was feverish and delirious, he called my name over and over. Lu Yun. Shen Lu Yun. Those memories were like smoke, drifting through my mind. I sighed and pulled away from his hand, insisting on kneeling. Your Majesty honors me too greatly. This servant dares not accept. It wasn't that I'd never trusted before. It wasn't that I hadn't tried. But I'd already learned how that ended, and this time, I had to protect myself. His Majesty kept his hand poised as if helping me up, unmoving for a long time. Until Empress Bo couldn't bear it anymore. She broke the silence, visibly displeased. You say such things like a stranger. His Majesty has always shown special favor to those of Zhongsue Palace. You'd best not betray that trust. Only then did the knife hidden in the picture become clear. Empress Bo slipped a packet into my hand. It contained poison. Colorless, tasteless, impossible for any imperial physician to detect. Eunuchs are rootless creatures. You and His Majesty are your only real support. On the night of the wedding, I clutched that little packet hidden in my sleeve, pretending to be nervous and timid. Empress Bo even gave me a reassuring look from afar. But just as we were about to drink our ceremonial wine in the bridal chamber, a woman suddenly burst out of the crowd. Don't drink that, Lord Shen. The wine is poisoned. The room erupted. After all, the wine had been prepared by me. It was a blatant accusation that I'd tried to poison Xin Zhizhong on our wedding night. And the most intriguing part? The woman who'd stepped forward wasn't just anyone. She was Bo Kaihui, the Empress's niece. Seems the rumors were true. Bosher did want to win over the Eastern Depot. Shun Jizhong didn't even spare her a glance. He downed the cup in one gulp. Whether it's poisoned or not, we'll see soon enough. He seized the noblewoman who had accused me and called for an imperial physician to examine her on the spot. The physician clearly looked down on eunuchs. No doubt Shun Jizhong had something on him to make him comply. What a shame the poison didn't kill you, eunuch scum. Yet Shun Jizhong wasn't the least bit angry. He seemed to be in a fine mood, even sending the woman off politely. Even Bo Kaihui herself, her mouth was stuffed, but she walked out unharmed. One of the maids explained to me. Lord Shin gave strict orders. No blood in front of the madam on her wedding night. But killing someone after they've been removed? That was fair game. The entire incident was later turned into a booklet and delivered to me. The writing was vivid, full of drama, almost as if I'd been there myself. It even included the scene of the Bo household throwing a fit and the Empress smashing teacups and inkstones in Zhongsue Palace. Holding that little storybook, I looked up at Shin Jizhong as he pretended to stagger drunkenly into the room. So, Lord Shin, do you know this anonymous gentleman who wrote the story? Or should I ask, does Anonymous just happen to have the surname Shun? It wasn't my first time seeing this storybook. I'd first come across it in Zhongsue Palace, confiscated from a junior maid. Many of the tales from beyond the palace walls were vivid and entertaining. For someone like me, who had entered the palace young and never left, they were a kind of comfort. Judging by the timeline, that would have been back when Shun Jizhong was just a low-ranking eunuch in the procurement bureau. Later, when I left the palace to accompany His Highness to his fief, I bought another copy at a street stall. The content had grown bolder, touching on factional rivalries and political intrigue. Thanks to those books, I even managed to escape Prince Cheng's rebel forces a few times. But each appearance of the book had been suspiciously well-timed. So, when one story predicted that Prince Cheng would detour to Xuanyang City, and I happened to be in Kuei, doubled over with abdominal pain, His Highness tried to calm me down. Lu Yun, don't place too much faith in that book. Whoever's behind it may have ulterior motives. Who knows, maybe Xuanyang is actually the safest place. Clinging to that slim hope, we didn't evacuate early. I paid the price with my legs. Now, I looked up at the man in front of me.
Why?
Why had he started planning around me, just a lowly palace maid, from so long ago? What was Shun Jizhong really after? I have nothing to offer Lord Shin. If all this had been about controlling the emperor, then surely on the day of the wedding, he must have realized I held little sway with His Majesty. I was just another discarded pawn, used and then cast aside. Shun Jizhong merely crouched in front of me, took the bloodied slippers I had worn through the wedding festivities, and, with the wick trimmers used for the red candles, gently snipped through the fabric. What I wanted, you gave me a long time ago, Auntie. He laid me down on the bed, and I tried not to tremble. My fingers tightened around the packet hidden in my sleeve. Too much ma face and isn't good for your health, Auntie. There's no need for it. So he'd known all along that the packet wasn't poison from Bosher. It was anesthetic powder I'd obtained myself. The trauma left behind by Qi Baoquan still lingered. I couldn't fully trust eunuchs, not even Shin Jizhong, no matter how kind he had been. I was still afraid. Afraid he would, on the wedding night, hurt me in that way. The Ma Fei San was my last line of defense. But Shun Jizhong only changed into his nightclothes and lay beside me. Auntie, I entered the palace at 13. The day I first lay on a straw mat. I gave up any hope for that kind of thing between a man and a woman. Some eunuchs chose the path of Qi Baoquan, bullying weaker women to make themselves feel powerful. But others chose a different way. I turned to look at him. Without his usual white powder makeup, he had a soft, youthful face. Many people, including myself, had overlooked it. The infamous Lord Superintendent of the Eastern Depot, Shun Jizhong, was still just in his early 20s. The next morning, I accompanied Shun Jizhong into the palace to offer thanks. I wore a married woman's hairstyle, demure and proper. Empress Bo found an excuse to call Shun Jizhong away. I thought His Majesty might privately ask me why I hadn't poisoned him the night before. Instead, he immediately stepped forward and reached to untie my sash. I backed my wheelchair a half step and snapped. "You and he, are you mad?" His gaze burned with fury, especially when he caught sight of the faint red mark on my ankle. "What did Shun Jizhong do to you? Isn't he a eunuch?" I almost laughed. Was this how Yuan he looked in my past life, when he saw my corpse? Qi Baoquan was a eunuch too, yet I had been tortured to death. I yanked the sash back and retied it. "Your Majesty, Lord Shun is my husband. A marriage granted by the Emperor himself, a supreme honor. A rightful and legitimate husband." Yuan he grabbed the hem of my dress. "Lu Yun, I regret it. I thought." "You thought what? That I would remain chaste for you? That I should have thrown myself into a river on my wedding night just to preserve my virtue?" His so-called affection for me was like a child with a favorite toy. He'd guard it jealously and treasure it dearly. But when someone else wanted it and he couldn't stop them, he'd rather destroy it than share. "What now, Your Majesty? Do you want everyone to see me leave Annal Hall in disheveled clothes? Should we gamble on who kills me first, Lord Shen or Empress Bo?" The hall fell silent. The dusk light filtered through the curtains. It felt like the countless evenings we'd spent in Zhongsue Palace after archery practice. "Your Highness, it's getting late. Lu Yun will play with you another day." But tonight was not one of those evenings. Not anymore. We were not the same people. Back at the superintendent's residence, I wiped off the red mark I had painted on my ankle. I'd drawn it on that morning, right in front of Shinjizhang. I thought he would ask why I'd done it, or at least question my relationship with His Highness. After all, before the wedding, the capital had been rife with rumors that I was hopelessly in love with the Emperor, that even under torture I'd refuse to reveal his whereabouts. But Shun Jizhong only crouched down beside me. "My apologies, Auntie." He gripped my ankle, callous thumbs smudging the red mark, making it appear even more suggestive and intimate. A tingling sensation ran up my leg. I looked down at Shun Jizhong. "Don't you want to ask me why I did this? I'm clearly using you." He merely smiled, head lowered, and adjusted the hem of my skirt. "I've spent years building my place in the palace, just for this moment. Whatever you want to do, Auntie, I'll do my best to help you achieve it." Not long after we returned home, Shun Jizhong sent me another one of his storybooks, detailing the latest events in the palace. At this point, I was starting to wonder if he carried paper and ink with him at all times, taking notes whenever he wasn't standing at attention. His Majesty had stripped Empress Bo of her authority over the 6 palaces, citing her niece's inappropriate conduct at our wedding banquet. These days, he was staying overnight in the quarters of a newly favored concubine, Lady Wang. "Lady Wang is one of yours, isn't she?" I asked. She wasn't the most beautiful, but she had quickly won the Emperor's favor. Empress Bo was seething with rage, yet Lady Wang still roamed the palace freely. And she was even pregnant with the Emperor's child. Why don't you consider the possibility that His Majesty genuinely favors her? Maybe that's why Bosher doesn't dare to make a move. Because I know exactly who he truly favors. That day, as I left Annal Hall, I saw a palace maid standing straight-backed, waiting to serve tea. Even the old maids who had once worked with me said, "She looks just like you back when you were in Zhongsue Palace." I wasn't even dead yet, and His Majesty was already playing that game. But Shun Jizhong said righteously, "She doesn't look like you. But everyone else says she does." I leaned toward him instinctively. "Take a closer look." It had just been a bit of idle talk before bed, but now that I suddenly got so close, I could feel the heat coming off his body. Suddenly, I remembered the way it felt earlier that day when he held my ankle. His expression remained calm, but his Adam's apple moved involuntarily. I reached out a finger and pressed down on it. I asked Shun Jizhong to find someone for me. "I heard there are eunuchs who weren't completely castrated." His expression shifted subtly as he looked at me. I scowled, annoyed by the look in his eyes, and quickly clarified. "Not for me. If we wanted to drive a wedge between the Emperor and the Empress, how could we let only His Majesty have a stand-in? The Deep Palace is a lonely place, and Zhongsue Palace now was no better than a cold palace. Surely the Empress could use some companionship. Not long after, Shun Zhizhong told me the arrangements were complete. The man's looks and temperament were both first class. How much did you pay for him? Just a bottle of premium moon salve.
Huh?
Since when did Shin Zhizhong become so stingy? He gave a faint, bitter smile. He may have been talking about that eunuch, but it sounded more like he was talking about himself. Most eunuchs who don't come from disgraced noble families are just poor folk. If they weren't starving, no one would ever send their child to be cut like that. One cut, and those with weak constitutions wouldn't even make it through the night. They'd be wrapped up in a straw mat and carried away. After all, the palace never lacked for people. I reached for the old tassel hanging from Shun Zhizhong's waist. A memory came rushing back. Shun Zhizhong, we met a long time ago, didn't we? A past I had almost forgotten. Back then, Consort Jin had just given birth to the third prince and was at the height of her favor. I was her chief maid, and so even the other palaces showed me respect. One day, I happened to pass by the eunuch's quarters. A boy, maybe 13 or 14 years old, had just been castrated. There was still wood ash sprinkled below him to stop the bleeding. He had a raging fever. An older eunuch said, "This one's not going to make it." They were already rolling him up in a straw mat. But as they carried him past me, that boy reached out and grabbed the tassel tied around my waist. It had a cloud motif. I sighed, thinking maybe this was fate. So I sent someone to the Imperial Medical Bureau to fetch a physician and left the tassel with him. Later, I heard the boy had survived. I was glad for him, for a moment, but then got caught up in other affairs. Not long after that, Consort Jin passed away, and the former emperor sent the third prince to Huanin as a fiefholder. No return to the capital without an imperial edict. I never imagined the little eunuch I had saved by chance would grow up in this bloodthirsty palace to become a mighty tree. By the time I returned, he was someone who could protect me. No wonder, when we met again in the Grand Hall, he said to me, "Lady Lu Yun of Zhongsue Palace, gentle and kind." I remember her. He had remembered for so many years. The Empress was pregnant. These days, Shun Zhizhong came home late, exhausted, with fatigue written all over his face. Sometimes he would fall asleep right on my shoulder. In court, a coalition of officials led by Chancellor Bo submitted a joint memorial accusing him of corruption and abuse of power in the Eastern Depot. The day the imperial edict for his dismissal came down, Shun Zhizhong was ordered to kneel outside Annal Hall, right in the path of court officials on their way to morning assembly. He had been kneeling for 6 hours. I entered the palace to plead for him, but Yuan he refused to see me. So I asked the maid to wheel me to Zhongsue Palace. Now that the Bo clan was gaining momentum, and the Empress had recently announced her pregnancy, her authority over the 6 palaces had already been restored. When I arrived, she was lashing the tea-serving maid, who looked somewhat like me. "Lady Shin doesn't visit Zhongsue Palace much these days," Bosher sneered. "Seems we've become strangers." Seeing me made her even more smug. She tossed a rag to the floor. "Why don't you reacquaint yourself with the place? Every brick and tile." She ordered me to scrub every inch of the palace floor on my knees, and only then would she consider asking her father to spare Shin Zhizhong. After all, Lu Yun, if you're divorced now, your only option would be a eunuch from the latrine quarters in Yong Alley. Filthy water soaked into my skirts. My knees, which Shun Zhizhong had worked so hard to heal, flared up again with inflammation and pain. Then the maid she had been punishing suddenly tore a piece from her own robe. She knelt beside me and began scrubbing too. She looked at me with an eager, hopeful smile. "My real name is Putsao," she said. "Not Lu Yun," the name granted by the emperor. She had never forgotten her true name. And she knew she was only a stand-in. When Shun Zhizhong returned and saw the bruises on my knees, he let out a sigh. His own knees weren't doing much better. "That's what they call sharing hardship," I said, trying to comfort him. I took the healing salve from his hand and warmed it with my palm, pressing it gently over his bruises. "You're still just as kind as ever, Auntie," he murmured. My hand paused.
Kind?
Not really. It's just that girl, Putsao, had been dragged into this because of me. It was because of me that you and he noticed her, and because of me that Bosher saw her as a threat. If I hadn't shown up today, she would have died, and they would have used her death to make a statement. You all want the Bo clan to grow arrogant and let down their guard. Then letting the Empress vent her rage on me would certainly please her. The situation was still too unstable. Bosher wouldn't dare kill me. A little humiliation, a little scrubbing, nothing compared to the hopeless, hellish days I lived through in my previous life. And if I hadn't married you, how would I be any different from that palace maid? So maybe I wasn't saving her. Maybe I was just trying to save the version of me that once stood alone and powerless. Just as I finished speaking, Shen Jizhong quietly pulled me into his arms. Bosher won't last much longer. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, the Eastern Depot exposed the Bo clan's involvement in a bribery scandal. His Majesty flew into a rage. Everyone from the Bo family implicated in the case was executed, and Chancellor Bo was dismissed and placed under investigation. Empress Bo, terrified, went into premature labor. The palace spies soon delivered word. The child was not of the emperor's bloodline. It belonged to Xiao Luzi, the eunuch whose life we once saved with a bottle of wound salve. Back then, Shen Jizhong had arranged for him to be placed in Zhongsui Palace, giving him no instructions whatsoever. He didn't ask for loyalty, didn't even need the boy to know who had helped him. All that mattered was that he lived well and stayed by the Empress's side. At first, Xiao Luzi was constantly punished in Zhongsui Palace, his body always covered in bruises. He would voluntarily report bits of news from the Empress's quarters. Later, the information became half-truths. Eventually, he only passed on harmless, trivial things. Last time I was in Zhongsui Palace, I glimpsed the hem of a eunuch's dark blue robe behind Bosher's screen, I said. And yet she had always claimed to despise eunuchs, even senior ones like Qi Baoquan, never allowing any of them near her. Now, Shen Jizhong said, "It's time to reel in the net." The Mid-Autumn Palace banquet was approaching. Shen Jizhong submitted a formal memorial. His Majesty had recently gained a son and purged the government of corruption, seizing a great deal of illicit wealth from the Bo family. Naturally, a banquet had to be held for the royal clans, a grand affair. Using the Bo family's riches to bid farewell to their own daughter? Nothing could be more fitting. At this banquet, I was no longer kneeling on the floor, suffering humiliation. I sat at the table, calmly waiting for the show to begin. Empress Bo still sat in the highest seat, but even thick powder could not conceal her pallor. Her eyes were vacant, her mind clearly far from the festivities. After all, no one walks away unscathed after losing their entire family and nearly dying in childbirth. Suddenly, a commotion erupted in the great hall, shouts of an assassin. Catch the assassin. Shen Zizhong shielded the emperor immediately. Empress Bo, like a madwoman, ran toward the chaos. Xiao Luzi had used his body to shield the frightened, sobbing crown prince. He'd been stabbed through the chest, and blood pooled across the floor. When he saw Bosher approaching, he still managed a gentle smile. "Don't worry, Your Grace. His Highness is safe." Bosher froze in place, like her soul had been ripped from her body. Even as palace guards came to carry away the corpse, she clung to it desperately, screaming, "He's from my palace. Don't you dare touch him." All around, the royal families looked on in stunned silence. Yuan He's face was grim. "Separate them. The Empress has gone mad. Take her back to rest." From that moment on, Zhongsui Palace was no longer a palace. It was a cold prison. The assassin was identified as a former subordinate of the Bo family. Their plan had been to steal away the crown prince and use him as a puppet monarch to support a coup. But Xiao Luzi had discovered the plan by accident. Her own kin had killed the one person she cared about. And yet Bosher couldn't even cry for him. What I didn't expect was for her to send me a letter. Inside, she claimed to hold the truth about what really happened in Xuanyang City all those years ago. In Zhongsui Palace, for the first time, I learned Empress Bo's full name.
Boaming.
Never say a woman is unworthy, she murmured. Even the dragon spring sings at night. It was a name that spoke of wide skies and open earth. But once she entered the palace walls, her gaze had never strayed from one man. Her hair was styled like a young maiden's, as if the past decade had never passed. As if she were still an innocent girl, doted on by her parents. I knew Xiao Luzi was someone you planted. She looked straight at me, eyes calm and unwavering. To avenge the past, when she forced me to marry Qi Baoquan, I had sent her the person she despised most, right when she had lost favor and needed companionship most. Yes, I replied. But whether you used him or not, that was entirely up to you. She laughed like a madwoman and hugged herself. That's right. His Majesty's affection couldn't even compare to a eunuch's loyalty. Then she drank poison wine and began to dance barefoot on the cold floor. As a thank you, she said, let me tell you a secret. That day in Xuanyang City, it was His Majesty who told the Bo family's army to delay. He said you'd never shown your feelings for him, so he wanted to see how far you would go for him, even if it meant losing your legs. So the tears he shed as he held my burned body that day were not just grief, but also twisted satisfaction. He agreed to the marriage not just because he feared the Bo family. I blackmailed him with this incident. But now that my relatives are all dead or exiled, I have nothing left to lose. Bo Quanming said this, then died from the poison. Outside, Yuan He rushed in the moment he heard the news. He looked at Bo Chuaming's corpse with zero pity, only disgust. He even kicked her body. Then he knelt down in front of me and buried his face against my knees. Auntie, now no one can stand in our way. It was never them standing in the way, Your Highness, I said. It was you. Your hypocrisy and cowardice. Your selfishness and cruelty. You're the one who pushed me into the abyss. So you knew all along, he snapped, but there was no guilt, no remorse. I just loved you too much. How is that wrong? He tried to touch me, but his fingers only brushed the burned scars on my legs, and he recoiled in horror. I couldn't help but laugh. This is your love, Yuan He? Not even comparing you to Xinjizhang. You're not even half the man Xiao Luzi was. I looked down at him sprawled on the floor. I risked everything to protect you because it was Consort Zhen's final wish. Bosher wanted to be empress not for you, but for power and position. No one will love a man made entirely of manipulation and emptiness. But Yuan He didn't care. As long as I was near him, that was enough. So he imprisoned me in Zhongsui Palace. He wouldn't allow any other eunuchs to attend to me, afraid that Xin Zizhang might have planted someone. Everything, my meals, clothes, even bathing, was handled by the palace maid named Putsao. After dealing with Bosher, Yuan, he turned his attention to the Eastern Depot. He wanted to eliminate anyone who could still restrain him. But after surviving through 2 reigns, Shun Zizhang's power had taken deep root, spreading like a vast web. Even when Yuan He issued an edict stripping him of his title, the Eastern Depot still operated as usual. Only then did he finally realize he had no capable men left. Rumors began to swirl in the palace, claiming that Xin Zizhang intended to support Lady Wang's son for the throne and act as regent. Yuan He smashed everything in Zhongsui Palace. Because Lady Wang had left the palace. Under the pretense of going to Mount Ling for spiritual retreat, she ignored summons and vanished from court. I am the emperor. How dare they defy me? I wheeled myself further away, afraid of being caught in the storm of thrown objects. But he didn't intend to let me go. He grabbed me roughly and began tearing at my clothes. Lu Yun, you're mine. I've lost everything. You're all I have left. I slapped him across the face. He froze for a moment, stunned, then clenched his teeth. Stop pretending. You've already been touched by that eunuch Xinjizhang. He didn't get to finish. Behind him, little Putsao raised a vase and smashed it down on his head, knocking him out cold. Madam Xin, hurry. She pushed my wheelchair toward the palace gates. Outside Zhongsui Palace, Shun Zizhang's men were already waiting. As long as we get you out, you'll be safe. But in the next moment, Arrows tore through the air with a deadly hiss. One pierced straight through Putsao's chest, killing her instantly. I looked back to see Yuan-he, blood trickling down his forehead, crawling upright again. He smiled at me and said, "Auntie, I hit the target. Just like when we were children in Zhongsue Palace." I burned with fever for days, dreaming only of Putsao's blood splashing onto me. When I finally awoke, I was told that Yuan-he had voluntarily abdicated and become the retired emperor. He requested to live in Zhongsue Palace. I asked Shin Jizhong to accompany me there. We found Yuan-he dressed in the garb of a crown prince, acting deranged. When he saw me, he smiled sweetly. "Aunt Lu Yun here loves Auntie the most." I smiled too and patted his head, then ordered a brazier to be brought in. "Here, you finally came back." I took his hand and led him toward the brazier. "Come on, step over the fire. It'll chase away bad luck." He hesitated briefly, but Shun Jizhong kicked him hard from behind. He stumbled and fell into the fire, his clothes quickly catching flame. It hurts so much." Burning coals struck his body, filling the air with the stench of scorched flesh and hair. It was nauseating. "So you can feel pain," I said. "This is for Shin Lu Yun of Xuanyang City." I pulled Shin Jizhong's sword from its scabbard and drove it into Yuan-he's chest, just 1 inch off from his heart. "This is for Palace Attendant Xue Putsao." His eyes flickered with a moment of confusion when he heard her name. He likely never remembered or even cared that Putsao had a real name. He didn't care about the real Shun Lu Yun either. He just obsessively wanted to control everyone and everything around him, to bend them to his will, unchanging and forever his. "Your Highness." That was the last time I ever called him that. "I'm returning Zhongsue Palace to you." The doors of Zhongsue Palace were sealed from that day on. No one was allowed in or out again. Later, palace rumors said that those who passed by often heard weeping or laughter from within, haunting like ghosts lingering in the air. Shin Jizhong supported Lady Wang's son in ascending the throne. On the day I packed my things and prepared to leave, Shin Jizhong stood at the gate, eyes red, blocking my way. "You're really leaving?" I nodded. The carriage I'd hired waited outside the residence. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but pulled his hand back in silence. I took 2 steps, looked back, saw he still hadn't followed, and couldn't help but laugh. "Aren't you afraid I won't come back?" Shin Jizhong had always believed I was only with him for revenge, which at the beginning was true. But after I had opened my heart to him, he'd always assumed I was just saying what he wanted to hear. This man who had once, as a dying teenager, clutched the tassel at my waist with all his strength, had somehow grown more timid as he lived on. "You deserve someone better, Auntie. At the very least, someone whole." I kissed him. Some people are broken in body. Some are broken in heart. Like Yuan-he looked noble on the outside, but inside, he was hollow. I took a new tassel, freshly made, and tied it around Shin Jizhong's waist. It was getting late. I truly had to go. I needed to take Putsao's remains back to her hometown. That was the promise I had made to her before she died. But then Shin Jizhong reached out and hooked his fingers around mine. "Then I'll go with you." After transferring his responsibilities at the Eastern Depot to his subordinates, Shin Jizhong accompanied me to Putsao's hometown, Yuanli County in the south, a small village nestled among fields of reeds. We buried her there. Clouds rolled across the sky, as they always did. And the days ahead of us were still long and full of life. The end.